Welcome to the Mayor's Forum. Today, my guest is Pat Naticchione, construction and zoning official for the Department of Planning and Development for Egg Harbor Township. Pat is here today to talk about the township zoning and inspections. Pat, welcome back to the Mayor's Forum. Good to see you again. I also like to mention to our audience and the people of Egg Harbor Township, we're very proud of Pat. He is the president of all the building inspectors, officials, I should say, in the state of New Jersey, and that's an elected position. So congratulations. I know your term is probably coming to an end pretty shortly.
Thanks, Mayor. Actually, they've asked me to stay on another year.
Oh, really?
So I'll be doing a 3-year term instead of a 2-year term.
Oh, that's great. Well, Pat, for our audience, tell us what you do.
I'm in charge of making anybody applying for permits for a zoning permit or a construction permit, that they apply for them, and we make sure they meet the state requirements for building. And also the first step would be the zoning permit to make sure that they meet our local zoning laws. That's what differs from out the state. Every town has their different zoning laws, but the building codes, it's a state code, so it doesn't matter whether you build here, Northfield, or somewhere up in North Jersey, they should all be basically the same.
Pat, what is zoning? So, I mean, the average person out there doesn't have a clue.
Zoning is what planners, the township fathers, have gotten together over the years and put a master plan together to figure out how they'd like to see the town get developed. And then they set certain restrictions, guidelines, setbacks, how far a property should be off of a property line, how much of the property should be covered, how tall buildings should be, going down to how many parking spots, the vegetation, and all that stuff.
And what's permitted, right?
Correct.
In other words,
The uses that are permitted, yes.
Right, so if you're in a residential zone, you're not permitted to put, commercial in the residential and the vice versa, correct?
Correct.
That's zoning. So how does a resident who wants to get something done know when they need a permit?
The easiest way to know is that zoning permits are needed just about for everything. Even getting a fence permit, you still need to come in and get a permit for that. Some things do require a zoning permit and not a building permit. Give you sheds, for example, up to 100 square feet only require a zoning permit. They don't require a building permit. A building permit is not required on a shed unless it's over 100 square feet. And as far as needing permits or construction permits, the easiest way to say that is anybody that's doing anything that is structural needs it. Maintenance work doesn't really require it, like painting, wallpapering, that type of stuff. A lot of the confusion comes in roofing and siding, decks. They're already existing on a house and people are like, it's there already, I don't need a permit, but you do need it. Anytime you're replacing something, you do need permits for it.
Even interior?
Interior, if you're doing, again, maintenance work, minor patchwork, no. But if you're doing a renovation job that's over, say, 25% of the room that you're renovating, then yes, permits are required.
And then how would a person go about getting a permit for something they want to do?
The forms are available online. They can download them that way and submit them by mail, drop them back off in person in Township Hall to our department. The forms can all be, filled out that way. The forms are pretty easy. It's name and address and brief description of what we're doing for work, what type of work they're doing.
All right, Pat, so once you have a permit and the work begins, your inspectors start to inspect. Can you sort of explain what a typical inspection entails?
The minor work ones, roofing and siding, it really, most of the time, is only a final inspection. We'll go out there, when the job's done to make sure it was done and they used the right materials and it was done right. Decks, just to bring another one up real fast, decks generally require 3 inspections. There's a footing, then there's a framing inspection, and then there's the final inspection. And we like to get the framing inspection on decks because before somebody goes and puts those railings on or that decking on, if they do have a problem with the joist not being nailed properly or the wrong size, it's a lot easier to fix then than after the product's completed.
Sure.
And we have a lot of residents that don't call or they put the deck up and don't have the permits, and we work with them that way too. We try to make it as least, troublesome for them, to get through when they do miss those inspections.
Sure, sure. Now, Pat, I understand that recently you went out with the school system and took some video of an actual inspection. You want to explain when the video goes on, just what's going on?
Yes.
Here we go.
This was actually it's a new house being constructed. So again, new houses, we'd have a couple phases of construction. You would have a footing inspection, a foundation, and then a framing inspection. This one that we're going to go into is basically the framing inspection.
Okay.
That's one of the inspectors for the department, John. He's actually our building subcode official that does the reviews of all the plans coming in too. Typically, when you first get to the house and you go in, just like that video showed, we look at the window to make sure the rough plumbing, rough electric, rough fire were done first, because we need those done before a building can do it. Then once that's done, the next thing John showed right there real fast was the framing checklist is left on the job. Once we know that paperwork is there, we'll start doing the inspection. And as he's going through, he's just, what we're looking for, the framing, the lumber sizes, they're all the right thing. When we do notice something through the framing, as John's doing here, we'll leave little notes. So when we tell them, hey, that's an easier way hey, there's a penetration up there, it needs to be fixed. It's a lot easier for them to see that stuff. We always check why we have to come after plumbing and electric is the way they bore the holes through studs, through joists to make sure they're to code and are in the center of the joist. And if they are too close, they need to put nail plates on, and you'll see a video of that up there too coming up. There's the nail plates to make sure that, when they are hanging the sheetrock, when we get to the final, that they don't penetrate a water line or electric where you can have problems in the future. Now John's up on the second floor here, and he's also looking at the trusses that were installed. Trusses are a little bit of a different animal because you want to make sure the right trusses are in the right locations, and that's all part of the plans. When the plan review was done, we get the layouts, the engineers, the architects have all approved that, where they should be, and the right size trusses.
So you mentioned plan review. So you get a plan before you even send out an inspector, and you look at it and you see if it's appropriate, right?
Before a permit is even issued,
Right,
yes.
right. You won't issue it unless you agree with the plan, right?
The plan review meets code, yes.
Right.
And John right there is checking the penetrations again. That's a fire stop, because if, God forbid, a fire was in the wall right there, that hole wasn't concealed, it would get into the attic and make a fire grow a lot faster rather than keeping it concealed.
And unlike other towns in the county, like Ventnor and Margate, that are pretty well built out, we're very busy.
Very.
I mean, even now, we had the building boom back in the mid-'90s and late '90s, late '80s, and it slowed down a bit, but we're still busy compared to other towns.
Yeah, I'm processing, the department is processing about 3,000 applications a year.
Wow.
So we're issuing close to 2,000 permits a year, and probably about another 300 or 400 updates to permits that are already there, and they're doing additional work.
Right.
And as John's going through the inspection here, he's checking the header sizes, that they're properly secured. It's everything that is spelled out in the plans are there. On the window there, the clips, the hurricane clips, which that have come a long way in the last recent years with all the storms we've had, and making sure that a house will last through a storm.
Right.
And there's what I was talking about, the trusses. That's a truss layout, to making sure those truss joists are in the right location and the proper ones.
People don't understand. They get mad at building inspectors have to do that. Let me tell you something, folks. You're having a house built or you're doing a renovation. You want to definitely make sure that your builder is doing the right thing for your protection.
Yes,
Well,
that's
for
what
your
we're there
protection.
for.
Yeah, that's what you're there for. Yeah.
We're not there to cause them extra money or headaches or anything like that. We just want to make sure something they build is safe. Because the codes that are adopted, if you did a 1 to 10 scale, they're probably like at a 3. And basically the state and a lot of architects and engineers, they like comment on the codes too. Everybody's determined anything less than that is actually unsafe. It's not a safe construction to live in, habitable, or any of that stuff. So.
No, your job's a very important job, and you know, sometimes people don't respect it and don't realize the importance of it.
And then this is just showing that once John did his preliminary walkthrough with the framing, now he's going to go back and check and make sure he looked at the plans to make sure there's no special features like you know, in this wall, this one, there's shear walls, what they call, for wind protection. That they have, those walls have to be plywooded before the sheetrock goes up, and there's a couple areas like that that'll all show. And again, John, Brian, who do most of our framing inspections and all of our inspections, they're very good at leaving notes like that. And you'll see some minor things like this one, because I was out there with John. There were some minor things, and those notes we'll let it proceed. And that's showing the next step after framing would be an insulation inspection.
This is the right off of West Jersey, I think, isn't it?
Yes, this is the new Gardenia Estates, the new
right,
project
right.
right off of there. There's 25 new homes going in there.
Right.
And over the last 2 months, we've issued all 25 of those new homes. So we got 25 new homes coming in within the next, you know, I'd say he probably gets about 2 to 3 of them done a month. And then this is the final inspection. This is basically after we're done. This is us showing up for a final inspection. That's kind of what we see. And that would be basically the house is ready to be moved in and lived in. That's our final inspection.
Very good. That was interesting. Well, Pat, we're going to take a little break here for community events, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion on what you do and how you do it.
Great.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Forum. My guest today is Pat Naticchione, construction and zoning official for the Department of Planning and Development for Egg Harbor Township, and we've been talking about a video that you brought with you that showed Gardenian Estates, and that's a D.R. Horton project.
Correct.
D.R. Horton has done quite a bit of building in the township. He's built a Little Mill off of Mill Road, and English Mill up by the high school, also off Little Mill, both 55 and older communities, which really have turned out rather nice and brought a lot of nice people to Egg Harbor Township to live and enjoy our really wonderful town. So Pat, let's talk about when a property owner needs a certificate of what is it, certificate of occupancy?
Yes. Well, just like that, when the project is coming to the final inspections, once we go out and all disciplines, the building, plumbing, electric, fire, they'll all go out and do their final inspections. And when they do that final inspection, they'll leave their stickers. Now those final stickers will get put into the panel box, so it'll be a permanent record because the panel box usually stays there. We've gone back in the houses years later and we could see when it was actually, you know, finaled from when it was under normal construction. And then after one of the things, once they pass their inspections, then it would come back to me as the zoning official and make sure all the paperwork is handed in, that the city engineer signed off on it, the MUA is signed off on it for the sewer line being connected properly, and Cape Atlantic Soils, they also do a sign off showing that the grading and everything else is according to their master plan that way. So once all those things come in, and then I also get a final as-built survey, which I'll be coming up a little bit, and we'll talk about that. Once all that paperwork is in and it's all approved, then we will issue a certificate. Generally, they're issued within a week of when they apply for them.
I got you. And that's something the bank wants too.
Yeah, they can't usually go to settlement without that.
Right. So once they're living in their house, how does the township make sure that they stay compliant with our laws?
That's one of the things that's, you know, enforcement is one of the things. We're out there generally, we're around the town. It is a big town, you know, a lot of square miles to cover, but being, you know, the guys do probably anywhere from 15 to 25 inspections a day. So we're all over the town, and there are, like I said, and that's only like on the building end. We do have the 2 guys out there, and we were just lucky enough to get another part-time zoning official to help out on some of those issues too with the property maintenance. So we're out there, we get to them as fast as we can, and a lot of times the public is what helps us too. They'll call up and say, hey, my neighbor's doing this, is that right? You know, and we appreciate that too. Because it's not like we're trying to get somebody in trouble. We're just trying to make sure you've hired contractors. We want to make sure they're doing it the right way for you.
Right. Well, I can tell you, when I joined the township governing body back in 1985, 86, excuse me, we didn't have a property maintenance code. So the governing body had to create a property maintenance code, and it's something that the people asked us to do. It had to do with grass cutting, maintaining your property, whether your siding was falling off the side, where your fences are falling down. So, Pat, what is a typical property maintenance matter, and how do you resolve that?
Well, property maintenance with ours is strictly exterior. We don't go into the houses. I know some other towns do have property maintenance, or they want to call them rental licenses or inspections for sales or rentals. We don't do that here in the township, but we do. Anybody that files a complaint, it is complaint driven. We will go out and check it, and if it's a valid complaint, they'll get a notice, a written notice from us saying, you know, you got to cut your grass, or you got to clean your, clean the trash off your property, or your siding's falling down. But it is strictly for the maintenance of the exterior of the property.
I have to tell you, I think that we need to revisit our property maintenance ordinance, quite frankly. I think that it's lacking in some areas. Now, one thing I'll let the public know is, and Pat mentioned that, we don't drive around looking for problems. I mean, they'll show up. I mean, if we see a problem, obviously, but it's complaint driven. And most of the time, neighbors complain, call up, and are very concerned about an individual who's letting their property get run down, and obviously it affects their neighbor's property, and so I really think we need to revisit it. For instance, other municipalities, they have inspectors that's all they do. They go out and they drive around, they look for violations in the property maintenance. Pat, you also serve as the CRS, Community Rating System Coordinator. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a new program that we just got into. It's basically anybody that's located in the flood zone, but it is open to every resident of the town. If you're not in a flood zone, but you're close to one, or you're in a low-lying area that might not be a flood zone, and you get it, because your homeowners won't cover a flood event. You know, like if a tree hits your house and it gets flooded or something like that, but if a water line breaks on the outside of a house and floods your house, that's flood damage, and your homeowners generally will not cover that. And it's, and a lot of people don't realize that. And with the CRS program, by going into it, there's a lot of paperwork that had to be involved. It was a long battle. We were doing it for over the last 3 years trying to get into this program. We finally got in. In fact, anybody that renews from back in October, on from October in 2017 on, will receive a discount on their flood insurance of 25%. With all the hard work that was put in by a lot of people, we were able to get the town a Class 5 rating. And since they've started doing it, there's only been, that I'm aware of in New Jersey, there's only 2 towns that came in at a 5. Most towns, when they come into the program, come in at like an 8, which is like a 10% savings.
We came in at 5? We
came in at a 5, and it's a 25% savings on your flood insurance.
I noticed my flood insurance went down.
That could, well, anybody from October on, like I said, we got the word in May of 2017.
Well, that's when mine is, October on.
Yeah, so we would be in the program starting October.
Right.
So anybody from October on will see that. So somebody that renewed back in June, they typically wouldn't have seen that. Now next June, when their bill comes out, they'll see the savings on there and stuff.
And most mortgage companies and banks, they won't even give you unless if you need a mortgage, you're going to have flood insurance.
If you're in a flood zone, absolutely.
And I heard and I read someplace that 80% of the damage that was done in the Houston hurricane, people did not have flood insurance. Their houses were destroyed, and that means they've lost everything.
Yes.
Because your homeowners does not cover flood.
Correct.
And they thought that they were not in an area that would be devastated like the Houston area was. So these poor people, not only have they lost their houses and their cars, they've lost everything, and they say that 80% of them are going to just be foreclosed on. And
Yes.
It's going to create a tremendous problem with the mortgage companies, the insurance company, well, not the insurance, because they're not covered that way.
And in flood insurance, if you're not in a flood zone, or with the new flood laws that we've adopted, if you build to the flood standards, or if you want to buy flood insurance and you're not in a flood zone, that policy typically for $250,000 of coverage is around $400 or $500 a year. So it's, for the peace of mind,
Absolutely.
It's not a big build. It's out there, and like I said, with the new standards that we've adopted, and if we got a lot of houses being raised now from Sandy still. Right. 5 years later, we're working on them. I think we're busier now with more of that stuff. Those new houses, when they come in, their flood insurance rates are going to be like they're not in a flood zone, because most of them are going the flood insurance gets rated by the flood elevation. If you're supposed to be at a 9, then you would be like a 0. But if you go to a 10, you're a +1. If you go to a 11,
Right.
you're +2.
Right.
If you get to +3 or above,
Yeah.
you're paying flood insurance like you're not in a flood zone.
Right.
And with our new standards that we adopted, we're going to make sure that happens to every one of our residents, because we adopted 3 feet of freeboard.
Right.
So when they come in and they build it, they're going to be getting the best rate they can as long as they build to the code.
What should anyone in the program, what should they be aware of? Anything?
They definitely, if their house is just there, if they want to, want us to come out and take a look, the most important thing is having an elevation certificate, because you really can't tell anything, and a flood insurance insurer or carrier can't give you a true rate unless you have an elevation certificate.
And how do you go about getting one?
An elevation certificate is issued, by any land surveyor. They're the ones that issue those certificates.
Huh, that's cool. You recently obtained your certificate, floodplain manager certificate. Can you explain what does that mean and what does it do for the township?
Yeah, I am, I'm trying to think, last month I became a certified floodplain manager. It was taking a course, and there is a test at the end of the course. The hardest part about that test, and unlike all my building tests, is building their open book test. They want to teach you how to find something in the book, and it's a time test. You got so many questions, you got to finish them. That test was a time test, but it was an open book, so you were doing a lot of stuff from memory. And their manual was probably about 6-7 inches thick.
Really?
So it was a lot of studying to do for that. In fact, I was actually shocked that the first time, because most people don't pass it on the first time, and I was really shocked that I was able to actually get the grade on there to be a passing one. But it was a lot, and it's a great thing, because now that is another thing for the CRS program. We actually get a couple more points as we're going through, and more credit. So our goal is to maybe, the next time we get our evaluation, every 5 years they do an evaluation, is maybe to move up another class. And instead of 25%, we'll get people to save 30%.
Good.
And that's a big jump. I mean, there's, from a class 4 or below, I think there's less than 200 of them in the whole country.
Wow.
So to get into that type of class that's an achievement.
Well, that's great, Pat. Hey, how about walking us through what you do to review say a plot plan?
Sure.
We have a video. Oh, there we go.
The plot plan, this is typically what would come in. Generally, when I get this the first time, the first thing I'm looking for is make sure it is done by a licensed surveyor. There will be a raised seal on them. It doesn't really kind of show up on this one as much. There's some information I'm going to be looking at. Then, as the second slide shows, I kind of highlighted all the things that, as I'm going through my review, what I'm looking for: the setbacks, the block and lot, the lot coverage, the lot area, that the house, that it's going to give me a finished floor elevation in there. There's all that type of information, and that's what I'm looking for and I tried to highlight them as I'm going through in stages. This would just be one piece of paper and have all my highlights on it. But that's what I'm checking. This is the zoning check that we do before
Right.
a building permit could be issued. And like I said, we're checking this against all of our zoning laws to make sure everything is compliant. Now, this is a preliminary one to get the permit. Now, there's also, as we said with the certificate of occupancy, they'll be submitting another one of those, and it'll be called an as-built. And basically, instead of saying proposed, it'll be saying final. And now, we're just making sure, hey, this is what they said they were going to build, and this is what they built. And that's the check we do to make sure that everything is compliant with our zoning laws and the state building codes.
Very good. Now, Pat, if someone needs answers or questions on planning and zoning, where do they need to go and get that info?
We have a lot of our information right on our website, which is the ehtgov.org.
Mm-hmm.
And if they went into departments under planning and development, there's one for zoning and there's one for the building department that would bring it to our home pages that explain a lot of this stuff. Or they're more than welcome to call the office, and I will definitely try to assist them to the best of my ability.
Now, if a young person is interested in possibly getting involved with zoning and planning for a future, what would you say or recommend to that person?
Zoning and planning is a little bit different. There are college classes for that, coming out with a degree, a planning degree, an engineering degree. It's definitely a field that's going to need people. Even the construction, getting a license to be a licensed inspector. They estimate now nationwide, not just here in New Jersey, and we're probably in the same thing, but nationwide within the next 15 years, 85% of the code officials will be retired.
Wow.
So there is a definite need for inspectors, and you could see it. They're hard to come by, but there are a lot of jobs out there, and people are looking for them.
Right. Now, you don't need a college degree.
They do have a degree program that you
Do
can
they?
go through. If most of the inspectors are done through, they're a contractor at one point, and then they're
Construction
done
trades?
in the trades, and then they
Right.
move to being an inspector. But there is a degree program out there that you can go to, for 2 years of college, go to even a community college, get that, they call it a construction management thing.
Huh.
And then you can train under a licensed inspector for a year. There are other ways to do it if you didn't go through that way too. I did it that way. Coming right out of high school, I went into which was odd. I was 20 years old and I went right into the field of being an inspector. So I didn't have a lot of, even though I worked with the family business and stuff since the time I was 12 years old, they don't count that. They only count
Yeah.
stuff once you're over 18. So
And now you're president of all the building officials. That's good. So, Pat, what do you see as an upcoming items that to monitor for planning and zoning?
well, again, we have a lot of projects that are getting to those phases where they're closing out, but we're also looking forward to a lot of the new development coming in. Like the Walmart site is one that's
Oh,
real
boy.
a lot of
Yeah.
activity over there. I mean, that's probably only 20% done from one. They got 2 or 3 buildings up right now, and there's still whole another building to go up over there, and a lot of units to go in there. So we've been very busy with that site.
Oh, boy, I know. And you get a lot of headaches. And
As far as big projects go, that is probably one of the easiest ones and on our end. I mean, we've all had our little things here and there, but
Yeah.
they've been a great developer to work with, and things have been going fairly smooth over there.
Well, Pat, I appreciate you being here. I hope that the people watching the show today understand that it's so important to make sure that a municipality provides good planning, zoning, and inspections for the future of our buildings. We hear so often of places all over the world where they weren't built right, and then there's a storm, and it turns into a real catastrophe. So, Pat, we're very proud of you in Egg Harbor Township. I call on you periodically when I have questions, and I always get the right answer. I always believe you always do what's right, and I think that's why the rest of the people who work in the building trades and the building officials really appreciate what you do. So, folks, thanks for being here today. If there's a program that you would like to see on the Mayor's Forum, you could give us a call at 926-4044 and let us know what that is. And if we can accommodate, we'll have a show for you. So again, thanks for watching the program. Thanks for being here, Pat.
Thanks, Mayor.
Take care.